Hey Rick, how you doing, man?
Hey, good morning, Keith. Sorry about the technical glitch this morning. I really appreciate your patience.
Oh,
Thank you.
100%, man. Anything for you. That's part of my path, right?
That's, that's part
Yeah.
of it.
And so that's going to be our topic today. And the topic is that's their path. This is my path.
Oh, okay.
This is mine. So when I think of that phrase, it takes me back to oftentimes behavior where I didn't live up to that phrase. It wasn't even on my radar. And it showed up for me a couple of ways. As I mentioned in previous podcasts, I had this way of being that was always judging and comparing others. And I found a way to always be superior, but it's not superior in the way that you think that most people might consider it, which is like, I was well aware that there are a lot of people that are smarter than me, that are more talented than I am, but it's more superior in that if I complain or judge someone, just complaining or judging how they do a presentation, what they're wearing, how they dress, how they live their lives. Even in my complaints, for the ego, that creates superiority. So if an ego can't have superiority just by flat out maybe physical attractiveness or by how much wealth someone has or all the titles and initials of degrees after their name, it'll find a way to do it by putting people down. And so I found my way doing that. And the way that an example is how it showed up in the physical world. So in the physical realm, I would be in a spin class or something like that. And I'd be like, why is the instructors off their bike, like making us go hard? They can't even do it. Like, don't make me do something that you're not doing, like walk the talk. And so I had a couple of instances in the very beginning of my, sports career, organized sports play, in which I was complaining to an adult that I respected about how the coach was making us run, for missed free throws or for whatever. The coach came in a bad mood and we were running. And I was like, I can't believe this guy's got us doing all this work and he's not doing anything. So there's just yelling. And he leaned in and said, what that's got to do with you? Like, these are your goals. Whether he does them or not, it's making you better. And that was the first glimpse of this is your path. The way it's shown up for me since I've been doing the practice is that whether people practice civility or they are caught up in ego and their behavior is more aligned with incivility, I just keep going with this is my path. Whatever they do, I'm not judging them. That's their path. This is mine. People have a problem with how other people think politically, or if they are not inclusive or open. Hey, that's their path. This is mine. And so I really started to embrace like being on my path and not being superior, but I just want to live a life and that's peaceful, that's kind, that's compassionate. So when I think of that phrase, what others are, about what others are doing, I really try to focus on my path. I'm trying to keep my little storefront clean. Rick, I'm out there sweeping up all the time, right after work, man, trying to keep it tidy. I don't have time to look and see what's happening across the way. I got to just stay right here. When you hear that title of the podcast, what comes up for you?
Well, before I get to that, I want to say congratulations. That's no easy thing to switch from super ego judgment of other people and feeling superior, which is a natural thing that we all do, to a place where you realize that that's a dead end. Before I throw my 2 cents in, Keith, I'd like you to tell the folks how that transition from the way you were that you just described to how you are now on your own path. How has that made a difference for you in your life? What's changed? What do you feel now that you didn't then, for example?
Peace. I feel peace. I was suffering and I didn't know it. Like, complaining is a form of suffering, except that I was unconscious to the suffering. Like I wasn't aware of it. Mm-hmm. And but I was, because I wasn't happy. I wasn't joyful. And so and there was like a process to get to this side of clarity, of peace. And the process was first being aware that I was almost always complaining and judging other people in situations, almost or comparing or trying to compete, or saying to myself, like, like, I'm working harder than they're working. Like, how do they get to go home? Like all of this stuff that I was doing along the way, but I was so identified with it that the thoughts that I had, the thoughts were me. I was so closely identified with the narrative in my head that there was no separation or space between the thought and who I thought I was. And so the first thing that I needed to do was become aware that this is just a thought. It doesn't mean that it's true, and I certainly don't have to be identified with it. And then once I did that, I became aware of the next step or level, which was I could make a different choice. I could align my behavior with a different thought. And a different thought is not to judge others, be focused on what I can do, how I can contribute to a space. But to answer your question, your specific question, Rick, the difference that it's made in my life is I'm peaceful, man. Like it's not easy to trigger it's not easy for me to be triggered by my thoughts or my narratives or my judgments anymore. I mean, they still come. I mean, they're still there, but I'm hyper aware of them. And so their suffering in my life has diminished, and I'm able to be a more effective contributor, collaborator, and teammate to the people around me. Like I go into spaces and I'm able to contribute something to the space. I think about this in the book that a lot of my colleagues at Mayo Clinic are reading. It's called The Mayo Clinic Guide to Stress-Free Living. It talks about this tribe that comes into this region, and they're nomads. And when they come into this region, the ruler of the region sends them a bowl, and it's a bowl full of milk filled to the brim. And it's to say, hey, listen, we're full here to capacity. You need to move on and find another place to live, another land, because we can't take on any more. Our resources are maxed out. And so the ruler of this nomadic tribe sends the bowl back, but he puts sugar into the bowl. And to symbolize, we won't take, we're only going to sweeten, we'll only sweeten the region. And this nomadic tribe ended up becoming the most wealthy tribe, the wealthiest tribe in the region, because they weren't there to take, they were there to contribute. And that's my path. My path is to go into every space and contribute. I tell Mayo Clinic, when people ask me what I do, I'm like, I got the coolest job in the world. I get to walk around all over the place and just sprinkle kindness. All over. Sprinkle kindness. Rick, I mean, what better job is that, man? Like, really? I mean, cool. So this is my path.
Yeah, and we're all beneficiaries of that as well. When people are around you, they feel great because of that, because they know that you are altruistically kind. You're not looking for anything in return. That's who you are. I think one of the things that is very important for people to get is that when we talk about path, and path includes things like gratitude and detachment and peaceful thoughts, not judging, those sorts of things. We don't have to make an enormous transition from where we are now. If we focus on just one or two things. For example, one of the things when I started down this road that helped me was I just concentrated on my breath. You and I are athletes. I'm a former athlete. So I think it's easy for us when you're in athletics to translate things in terms of your body. So for me, one of the things that helped me realize I was judging was to trick myself or to teach myself that when I would judge others, I would take a breath, or I would do something like have a little a cue, a physical cue, so I knew I was doing it, and then I would just notice it. I didn't try to make a radical change in it. I just said, okay, judging, and say the word out loud, judging. And I was surprised and shocked and disappointed in myself. I couldn't get through the morning without like 100 judges. And I had to include, when I was judging myself, where I would say things like, you're really not working as hard as you should, or you're letting your kid down, or what's wrong with you? How come you can't be like so-and-so? Every time that happened, I would just have this little physical cue that made me monitor it. So I think one of the things people should get from this is that if you want to go down a path that's going to take you away from suffering, that's going to alleviate some of the pain with always wanting things to be different, is to first begin by deciding that's what you want in your life. The old idea with Gandhi was be the change that you see in the world. Be that change. You want to be calm. You want to be non-judgmental. You want to be someone who sprinkles kindness. Do it. Okay, but that's going to create a transition, which every transition involves difficulty, and it's uncomfortable, and it doesn't feel right. And so we start small. We do those little steps, those Kaizen steps, where you just take a tiny step. And the first step, I think, is monitoring what you're doing that you don't like. You don't have to change everything. Just look at it. Just look at it, and then you'll start to see, okay, if I can just do 10% less judging. Let's say between now and noon, I'm not going to judge anybody. Or now in the next hour, I'm not going to judge myself. But when you catch yourself doing it, you do the cue, and then you remind yourself, boy, I got a long way to go. Until it becomes a habit. And then, like everything in life, if it becomes a habit, it's ingrained in you. But I think it takes some weeks, months. Well, let's put it this way. To make the transition consciously, and to be in the moment, it takes a lot of work and a lot of time. It's a consciousness, a be here now intention that we don't always have, and usually don't have. We live our lives pretty much on autopilot. So you've got to make sure that your autopilot is off and you're flying yourself.
Yeah, exactly, Rick. And this path that you're on, and we can kind of end here with this question, with you answering this question. The path that you're on, I've known you to be on it for a very long time. What was it that, I mean, for people that may not have listened to some of the other podcasts, you've been a successful trial attorney in your professional career for a very long time. And and we have other people that are professional entrepreneurs and successful entrepreneurs and healthcare workers or medical providers, consultants. So what was it that made you choose a different path? Some people think that that when you choose a path of being peaceful, that you give up, making money, generating revenue, having a nice house and all that stuff. Like, you can have all of that. I mean, because that's a physical world, and we are human beings. There's a human part and there's a being part. And so I want to bring the being of being my best self, of being conscious, to the human part. The human part is where the default mode is kind of like rolling strong in my life. So, but what was it that became your pivot point to choose a different path with how you would start to live your life and things like that?
I don't think it was any one thing, Keith. I think it was just a self-reflection and deciding that I didn't like who I was, and I didn't like the way I was treating myself or others. And I didn't like the feeling of anxiousness. Mm. I didn't like the feeling of guilt over things, even small things. I had this turmoil, and I just couldn't seem to get through it. I had a lot of stuff going for me, but I wasn't happy. And so I started to read a lot on this topic, and I started to attend lectures, and I watched film on it, videos, podcasts, and a lot of it didn't make any sense to me. A lot of it was way over my head. I wasn't ready for it, but I stuck with it. And some things would resonate. And what I started to do was, when I found somebody that I thought was really important or helpful to me, put it in a way that I understood it. I kept a notebook. I called it a transformation notebook. And I would just jot down bullet points about ideas that I liked. And so, and when I'd hear those ideas again from a different author, then I knew, wow, these two people came from very different backgrounds, and they were saying the same thing. So I think it was the idea that I was dissatisfied with who I was personally, despite all the trappings. And I liked the idea that you could change if you wanted to. That was really something I never considered. I thought, well, hell, this is life. I'm living it. I'm doing great. But I didn't like myself. Let me put it to you this way. If you were to think of well-being as a yardstick, let's say it's 36 inches long. That's a yardstick, 3 feet. I had 35 and a half inches of an amazing well-being life. but there was a half inch that was missing. And that half inch had an out of proportion control over who I was. It involved the judging, it involved being hateful, it involved having a hair trigger with anger, it involved being physically frustrated and taking it out on others.
Anxious.
Anxious, all of those things. And that missing link, that little half inch, started to run my life. And when I was conscious, when I woke up to that, I started down my path, which was to recognize that that half inch will always, always try to control me unless I have a strategy for getting out of it. And the path for me is like you: kindness, inner peace, gratitude, joy, feeling of empathy and help for other people, friendliness, all of those things that we talk about in this podcast. And that is literally, it's like an abscess, you know, when you stick a needle in and drain it. That's what that path feels like when you're on it.
Wow, Rick, man, you were dropping knowledge. Oh my God, that half inch.
I don't know, man. I just talking about me.
No, dude, that half inch was disproportionately, controlling your life. And the same with me. People that live in fear, and I did too. But it was the fear of not reaching my full potential. It was a fear of other people getting credit for something that I thought I deserved, or a break that I thought I should have gotten. It was anxiousness about the uncertainty of what's coming next. Just all of that I was unaware of, that I was living in. But any time, any energy that was unfocused in my life, which is a lot, because you only have a finite energy that you can deeply focus with. All of that was that half inch. I mean, and that half inch was taken over. So I mean, in the half inch, it's one of those things, Rick, where the half inch wasn't trying to take another inch. It was just like, this little space we have is enough, because we're so potent and effective that it didn't need any more space. And so it was able to hide in the background.
That's right.
Exactly. But control everything. Exactly. How I saw the world, how I saw other people, how I saw situations. I saw challenges and I saw problems instead of openings. It was able to shade everything, man. There was always this cloud. Dude, you dropped knowledge. That's awesome.
Well, thanks, Keith. One other thing I think is important to realize about it is that if you looked at that half inch and called it like a prism, that's a PRISM, not prism, like the way you look at life through that lens, okay? If you look at it in a certain way, you'll realize that a lot of what you think you see that's real is distorted. It's not real.
No.
So for example, something that used to irritate me a lot, like you were saying, other people getting credit. Well, what about a situation where another person really didn't take credit, but someone gave them the credit, but you blame that person for taking something from you when they're totally innocent?
Yeah.
My point about the prism and that half inch is that half inch creates all kinds of illusion for us. That half inch, as you say, controls our lives and creates a prism through which we see all of our world. And you need to start looking at that prism. Is it accurate? Part of the problem with being neurotic is that, you're just wrong. I mean, it's not that there's anything like there's this conspiracy to keep you down or other people are harming you. It's your view of how you're looking at it that's just wrong. So if you just look at it like, oh, maybe I've got a misperception here, and take a look at what you're thinking about things, I think you'll find that a lot of things that you're run by are things that are illusionary, that you've created. As we've talked so many times in these podcasts, most all of your difficulty comes from the feeling that you create about something. And usually you're wrong.
I know, it's crazy. Man, Rick, thank you for a great show, man. I'm glad you and I are on similar paths, man. And thank you for being on this journey with me. I love you.
I love you too, Keith. You're doing a hell of a job and helping a lot of people, and that's a wonderful thing.
Thank you, Rick.